Jesus saves people. That Jesus rescues souls. Not just a little bit and not just a Band-Aid, but completely and entirely and eternally rescues people. Little people who don't even know that much about life yet, and people who have gone through the storms and the hardship of life. Jesus is on a mission to save people. There are some of you here this morning that maybe don't think you need saving. I want you to listen to this story we're going to look at from the mouth of Jesus. And I'm going to ask you to listen to it, and maybe you'll see yourself in this story. There are some of you here who believe that maybe you are not eligible for saving. You have wandered too far, or you have found it hard to believe for so long, and you have pushed it away, and you're like, well, it's too late for me. I want you to listen to this story that Jesus told specifically to talk to you today. And so we're going to look at this story because the chapter that we are in is a place where Jesus puts together three kind of stories. And what the emphasis of these stories is that God goes looking for lost people. Maybe this week, somewhere along the course of the week, you lost something. Keys, your phone. I talked to somebody after first service who lost their wedding ring this week. You lose stuff. We lose stuff. It's a part of life, right? You lose stuff. Now, when you lose something, do you kind of like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I should possibly try to remedy this problem that I have lost something, or do you just naturally get up and start looking? Isn't that what you do? If you haven't found your keys, you're like, where did I put those keys? I mean, you may give up after a little bit, but that TV remote that you want to change the channel to, that somebody has stuffed under a pillow somewhere, and you go, I want to turn the TV up. Where is it? You start looking right away for lost things. Jesus uses that exact idea. He talks about a lost coin and a lost sheep. He uses that exact idea to say that's how God is. As soon as he recognizes someone is lost, he's looking for them. Now, where are they? Can I go find them? And I don't know if we fully and deeply appreciate that is the heart of God for us. But Jesus says that's what we should understand. And the story that he tells here is a famous story. It's a story maybe you've heard before, but it is meant to highlight this idea that God goes looking for lost people. Plus, what it really is pointed at as the end of the stories that he's told here is that maybe there are more people who are lost than you think. Maybe you're more lost than you think, and maybe there's more hope for you than you think. And then there's this side benefit that it's a challenge to the people of God, the church of God, that we would have the same heart for those who are lost as our Father does. And I wonder if we do. And so as we read this story, hopefully it's something that challenges us and teaches us and calls us to the thing that Jesus wants us to call to. This story is called the prodigal son. I don't know if you've ever heard of the story of the prodigal son. It's found in Luke chapter 15, and we're going to start at verse 11. But it isn't just the story about one son who wanders away. It's actually the story about a family with two sons and a father, and the father is the hero of this story. And so as we read this story, I'm hoping that it will do the same thing for us as it did, as Jesus wanted it to do to the people who were listening to it. So Luke chapter 15, start with me at verse 11 down to verse 13. It says this, Jesus continued, "There was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had and set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living." All right, so we've got this idea here that Jesus is teaching about how God actually works in this world. I think it is vitally important for us to understand how God actually works. I think it's really important for our kids to understand how God actually works, because there are a lot of ideas about God out there that aren't right. They don't reflect who he actually is, and they are causing many, many problems. In the time that Jesus is talking, and even today, I would say religious people gravitate towards the ideas that Jesus is confronting. And those ideas, if you're a religious person or you know religious people, this is kind of how people naturally think. They think, I know how God works. You should do good, and you should be good, and then God will want you. And then God will have you. If you are a good person, if you do good, then God will welcome you. Most people get that idea, get that concept that God wants us to be good, and if we are, then that's what we think about how God works. The corollary to it is do bad, be bad, and God wants nothing to do with you. And God won't have you, and God closes the door to you and he rejects you. This idea is hard to get away from. It is an idea that has lasted through the centuries. It really is the idea at the core of every religion on earth. The rules might be different, but the idea is perform. Choose if you want God to like you or not. Choose if you want God by performing. And if you perform well enough, thumbs up. And if you don't perform, thumbs down. And Jesus tells this story to blow that idea up, to throw that idea completely out. He tells a story about a father who has two sons, and the younger one is the one he starts with. And this son is just lost. He is lost in life. He is lost in his family. He is lost in what matters and what doesn't matter. And so one day, he goes to his dad and he basically says, Dad, can't believe you're not dead yet. Could we just pretend you're dead? Give me my money now. I mean, that's really what he says to him. He says, Dad, I was kind of hoping that you'd be out of my way. I cannot overstate the insult that it is for the young son to come to the father and say, give me my inheritance now. Dishonor in that society is a really big deal, and this son dishonored his father in a great way. And his father stunningly, graciously, lovingly says yes, and divides his wealth and gives half of his wealth to this disrespectful, ungrateful son who says, Dad, I would rather have your stuff than you. I would rather have what you could do for me than you. A lot of people interact with God like that today. Even Christians interact with God like that. We go to God and we say, God, give me a good family, give me a spouse, give me a career, give me a job, make me healthy. If someone's sick, please heal them. Make sure that I have enough money. We thank you for our food. Could you make sure that we're safe on our trip? We pray to God for what he can do for us. And I wonder if Jesus in this parable is asking you, do you want God's stuff more than you want him? Would you rather just he give you the inheritance and get out of your way? That's kind of how this younger son comes to God, comes to the father. But then the son, I don't know if you see this, but there's kind of two phases to this. First, he says, give me all the stuff. And yet that doesn't do it for him. He's like, you know what, Dad, you're still in the way. I have your stuff, but I can't stand living here. I feel like I'm not allowed to be free and do whatever I want. And that's a big theme in our world today, isn't it? You should just be able to pursue whatever makes you happy. He's kind of like, you're really cramping my style. You're telling me things that I shouldn't do and should do, and I feel this guilt. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to go leave this home, and I'm going to go use the wealth that I now have. And Jesus says he spends or wastes his money on wild living. This son reflects a normal way that we think, a normal way that these kids will think unless we teach them differently. And that is, in order to be happy, I need to get what I want. Anyone ever have a toddler at home? This is the doctrine of toddler, right? In order to be happy, I must have what I want. But as you grow, what you realize is there's not really satisfaction down that road, is there? If you live just getting what you want, pursuing what you want all the time, do you ever find yourself deeply, lastingly satisfied? This son believes that, lives that, walks that way. He believes that the key to the life he wants is satisfying whatever desires he has. And Jesus says it leads to a really dark place, a really bad place. There are people who right now struggle with addiction, and they struggle with addiction because they believe I should have what I want. I should live for the thrill. I should get the excitement that I need and that I want, and then they chase it and chase it and chase it. It leads to a place of despair. Always believing that you should have what you want leads you to the ultimate conclusion that you can never fully have what you want. Right? I mean, we all understand at the basic level as human beings that healthy living comes not from being comfortable or having our desires met. It comes from controlling and saying no to what feels good, doesn't it? You guys don't believe me? All right. Well, this afternoon there will be a dessert table in the back. Are you going to be healthier if you have everything that you want? Or if you say no to some of the things that look good? Which one's going to be healthier? Are you going to have a better life if when you are tired and sleepy and worn out and your alarm clock goes off anyway, that you get up and go to work and do the things you need to do? Or if you fall into your desires and say, I just feel like I need a little more sleep, and you just stay home and stay home and stay home? Which is going to bring you the better life? We get it. If I just live for whatever feels good, I'm not going to live very well for very long. And yet, there is this persistent idea inside of us that if I could just have what I want. And so this son chases that. He denies himself nothing. He goes out and he lives that way. And honestly, it's very hard not to think it's true. That the stuff I shouldn't have and the stuff that's wrong, if I could only have that. But Jesus ends the story the way these stories always end. He finds himself in need, in a desperate situation, full of regret and full of shame. It is the irony of living to satisfy your wants that you will live in want. It is a beast that can never be satisfied. It can never be filled. Because as you chase what you want, you always want more. It is a way that we get trapped. And so Jesus' point is that just like the coin was lost and just like the sheep was lost, this son is lost. And he says, lost ones are the ones I came to save. He's going to tell that in the rest of the story. And so before I get there, I just want to say this to you. If you are lost, if you don't know which way is up, if you don't know what life is all about, if you don't know who you are, if you can't figure out what life should mean, Jesus wants me to say to you, and Jesus tells this story to say to you, he came to save you. He wants you to come home. No matter how far you've gone down the road that you've gone, no matter how much you've destroyed, no matter how many things you've said or things you've believed or stuff that you've done, you don't need to keep going that way. There is an invitation through this story to turn away from the devastation that's coming your way and come home. You can be saved. Jesus is looking for you. But the story doesn't end there. So let me pick it up and keep going, because this son was not just lost. He also found himself really at the end of the story very broken. Lost is one thing. Broken's a whole nother thing. And often when you are lost, you don't even realize you're lost until life falls apart, until the roof caves in, until everything has shattered, until you are wounded so deeply that you don't think you will ever heal from it. We find this man completely without hope, without resource, this younger son. For a little while, he lived like a big spender, everything he wanted right now. No reason to say no, no reason for self-control. Have whatever makes you happy. But what he found out is that living that way is a pathway to broken. Some of you right now are broken. Some of you right now are on a pathway to broken. And I want to read this story because I want Jesus to say to you what he was saying to the people in front of him, that if you are broken, you too are invited to come home. So pick it up with me at verse 14. It says this: after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate." The story of a broken son, someone who has been devastated by his own choices. He went from the wealth that was acquired over the course of his father's lifetime to starving, almost to death, and virtually invisible, powerless, penniless, hopeless, broken. Some of you listening right now are broken. Maybe it's from the choices that you've made and the pathways that you've gone down. Some of you are broken by pathways and choices you didn't make. They just showed up in your life. You feel all that shattered, all of that hopeless, all of that can't ever go back together again. And maybe you've never considered your Creator or Jesus Christ. It just never seemed like it fit. But Jesus is telling this story to say to you that there is a salvation for you that is bigger than you've imagined. It isn't just a make it through kind of salvation. It is a healing to the depths of your soul. The psalmist writes in Psalm 23 that the Lord is my shepherd, and he gets to like walking through the valley of the shadow of death, and then he says, he restores my soul. Some of you are broken and you need the only one who can do it to restore your soul. And maybe you think it's impossible. But Jesus is calling for broken people to come home. Maybe you're a Christian and you are broken. And he's saying to you, come home. He tells the story so that we know that there is hope for you. There is healing. There is restoration. The son who was so far away and so far from acting like a son decides, I will cross my fingers and hope that I could possibly go home. And I don't expect much. I just hope that I can go home. I'm not even worthy to be your son. When you're broken, boy, doesn't everything change? He's like, I'm not even worth being your son. I know what I've done. I know the mess that I've made, and it's impossible to unring the bell. So I'm just going to go home and say, please just make me a servant. Brokenness affects what you think of yourself. I'm a reject. I'm defective. I'm worthless. I'll never, ever be the same. It's over for me. So he goes home. He just takes that step. And Jesus uses that picture to invite us to have just enough faith to turn and go home, because he's hoping that the Father will have pity on him and let him come home and just have food and just work as a slave for the rest of his life. But what he finds when he comes home is that the father has more than pity. The father has love. Father has forgiveness. The father's been looking for him. I don't know if you saw that, but while he's still a far way off, the father is looking for him and he sees him and he runs to him. Because the father has been looking for the son that was lost. And as the son comes home, he is restored. Put a ring on his finger, he's my son. Give him clothes, he's my son. Put sandals on his feet, he's my son. Let's have a party and celebrate. You are in, you are back, you are welcome home. If you are broken, there is a healing for you. If you are lost, there is a finding for you. The invitation is to come home. Not that every problem that he had was solved as he walked home. It doesn't work like that. But what he found was there was a bigger answer than all my problems going away. He found that he was welcome home, that he was wanted home, that he had done all this horrible stuff and his father still wanted him. And his father said, let's do the work to put this back together. Let's have a party that you're here. Just take that step of faith and come home. Just say that you have nothing to lose in trusting Jesus, and you will find that you are embraced by the Father, that restoration can be yours because broken people need to be saved. And God is inviting every broken person to come to him and find that his power is greater than anything that broke you. Greater than any fallout that you've seen in your life. And that story, if Jesus ended it there, would be an incredible, amazing, awesome story. A son who left it all, who disrespected his father and walked away and blew it with horrible choices, came home and was forgiven and embraced and restored. That would be like, yes. But that's only half the story because this father had two sons. We all get that lost people need saving, and I hope that if you're lost, you understand his point is you're not beyond saving. If you're broken, his point is you're not beyond saving. You are invited to come home. But then Jesus addresses a whole different group of people. Verse 25. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you, never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you have killed the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you are always with me and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Jesus surprises us with the end of the story here. And this is the point he wants to make to the audience. As a pastor, I see this all the time. People who think that what Jesus is talking about here, what he's trying to confront here, they actually already kind of are mistaken about it. They think that if you're a good person and you do good, that's how you get into God's good graces. They think that you don't need saving if you save yourself. If you walk the straight and narrow, if you're a good person, if you go to church, if you don't try to hurt people, if you try to help people, if you don't lie, if you don't steal, that's what makes God happy with you. It is hard for them to understand. Jesus is saying to them, good people need saving too. Good people can't save themselves. Religious people, rule-following people, those who have never rebelled and those who have kept working, those who were never wasteful or disrespectful. Jesus is saying, guess what? You need saving too. He's talking to the religious leaders here, asking if they will understand that being good isn't enough. It's a really important message for our kids. For them to understand that being good is important, but it doesn't save you. It can't save you. Because once somebody gets on that treadmill of trying to be good enough, you never get there. You run and you exhaust yourself and you burn yourself out and you discourage yourself and you look at other people who seem like they have it all together and you compare yourself to it and it just never gets you anywhere. Jesus tells this story to say to us, good people need saving too. I know that doesn't play well in our society. Our world is all about, you got to make stuff happen for yourself. You got to save yourself. Don't wait around for someone else to save you. We've got fairy tales now that aren't waiting for someone else to save you. You just save yourself. And that's a really good sounding lie. It makes you feel good about yourself, except it doesn't actually work that way. Maybe you have enough in you to put your life on this earth on a different pathway and make a better life for your kids while they're here on this earth. But even if you are completely successful in that, all the good that you do will last for a couple of decades and then be over. What if the saving that you need and your family needs is so much bigger than you've ever imagined? Is so much deeper and so much longer than just a better life or a good life or a nice life? Jesus' point was that good people can't save themselves. In this story, the older brother represents these religious good people, the ones who think that they can save themselves. They think they're supposed to save themselves. Well, God gave us rules, didn't he? And we're supposed to follow them, and isn't that the way? And Jesus is saying this story to say, no, that's not the way. Good people get angry with God either because God offers salvation to the undeserving, and that's just not fair. Or God points out to them that they need saving anyway, even though they were good. How does he do that? Well, at the beginning, the story of the son leaves the family and is outside, and the father goes and runs to him and brings him in. At the end of the story, it's the older son who's outside and at odds with his father, and the father goes out and invites him in. The good son is outside. The younger son is outside. Both of them need to be brought in. And the father goes to both of them and invites them in. The story at the end here is left without an answer. We don't know if the son comes in or not. Because the question was, will you believe that you're invited in because you've done good? Because if you do, then you want these other bad people thrown out. Or will you believe that you need to be invited in, not because you deserve it, but because it's given to you by the gracious hand of your father? As the son responds to his father's invitation, you could feel the resentment. He says, this isn't fair. I deserve your love. And he doesn't. And the father says, it's never about deserving. It's about whether I choose to bring you in or not. The father loves them because the father loves them. Neither deserve it, but both are offered it. One is a wreck, and the father loves him. The other one's good, and the father loves him, but not because he's good, it's because the father loves him. And they both needed the father to go and get them. I think this is so important for the church of Jesus Christ. To understand that avoiding really bad stuff doesn't get you saved. People whose lives are a mess matter to God. And God goes and seeks them out. But you can still be good and lost, just like the older brother. He actually says he stays lost because he's good. He won't come in. He rejects his father's love and forgiveness because he's good. It is the thing standing in the way of him coming home. Church, the God that we love, the God that we serve, welcomes the lost and broken in. Do we? Do we have the same enthusiasm and the same heart that the Father shows looking for the lost and broken? And while we do that, lest we get self-righteous and feel like we deserve it and they don't, understand that good people need saving too. from their pride, from their self-righteousness, from their self-sufficiency. And so all I wanted to do today is simply this. I wanted to take this story that Jesus told a couple thousand years ago. I wanted to use it like Jesus used it to extend this invitation to every single person here. If you're lost, come home. If you're broken, there's healing for you, restoration. Come home. And if you're religious and good, he invites you to set aside all the reasons you have to trust yourself and to trust him instead. Today, the Father invites you through Jesus Christ to come home. To know not being outside, but to being inside. To know belonging, to know forgiveness, to know love, to know healing, to know salvation. And that salvation can be yours today. In whatever way you're lost, in whatever way you're broken, in whatever way you think you're good, right now, the Father invites you, come home.